Okay, I think I'll make a start. So, hello, good afternoon to both of our speakers today. Good afternoon to everybody watching. Thank you very much, and welcome to this program, Parole de Créateurs face à l'urgence écologique, in English, Creators Facing the Climate Emergency, a series of conversation bringing together each time an artist and a scientist or thinker to inform and inspire us during this time of environmental crisis. So for those of you that are new to the foundation, to the Fondation Thalie, and to the program, we are a multidisciplinary arts foundation and residency based in Brussels, founded by the writer and collector Nathalie Gouillot. And the foundation aims at creating bridges between visual arts, creative writing, and societal issues through a program of exhibitions, monthly talks, and artist residencies. And in this program in particular, Parole de Créateurs face à l'urgence écologique, or Creators Facing the Climate Emergency, we seek in particular to answer questions such as, what is the role and responsibility of the artists, scientists, and thinkers with regard to the environmental issues we're all facing today? How are artistic practices being influenced, and how can artists collaborate with other disciplines to create a better future? And how can we imagine new ways of creating and using our limited existing resources? And we believe strongly that we need more than ever to hear the words of the creators around us, those that can help us to imagine and to construct new ways of being in the world. And this is why we've created this bilingual monthly series with discussions in both French and English, and we'll be welcoming many interesting, exciting guests over the year. Our next talk is on the 27th of January with the artist Adrien Vescovi and the philosopher Bernadette Bensaude-Vincent. Also on the 12th of February, we'll be welcoming Daniel Wetzler of the collective Rimini Protocol and the neuroscientist Albert Mukaiber. And we'll also be welcoming artists such as Rosella Biscotti, Thais Bersteker, Natsuko Uchino, Naomi Sauve, and Julien Charrière. So lots of exciting, interesting, and inspirational conversations to come. And I'll be animating, moderating the English-speaking conversations. So I'm Stefano Vendramin, a curator specialized in environmentally conscious arts and the founder of the agency Strata. And this conversation is also being broadcast live on Facebook and will be shared on YouTube and as a podcast following the conversation. So you can watch it again or share it later. Last but not least, I would like to introduce our very special guests. I'm very honored to have you both here today, Isa Melsheimer and Tim Ingold, Professor Tim Ingold. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. For those watching, please, do think of questions, because the talk will last for about 45 minutes, and then we'll try to leave at least 10-15 minutes for your questions, so don't hesitate to think about any questions. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Isa Melsheimer. So to go back to the beginning, you studied at the Berlin University of Arts, where you also did a master's under George Baselitz. Mm-hmm. And Berlin is also where you live and work to this very day, where we are seeing you right now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for nearly 30 years, your work, which is mostly on site, has looked at modern architecture as very much as the natural environment through the mediums of drawing, embroidery, and sculpture, and often incorporates plant life within it. And you're particularly known for your engagement with the history of modernist and postmodernist architecture, such as that of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Le Corbusier, and of course their underlying concepts of human beings, nature, built space, and society. And in your work, we could say that you're almost like an archaeologist of these forgotten and neglected buildings, recreating their distinctive shapes, both from your observation and from your reimagining of their forms and their spirits. And you also find inspiration in literature, film, popular culture, and academic texts, including science fiction, or for instance, the work of Donna Haraway, which we'll mention later. And overall, your work explores very important issues today, which is why we are very pleased to invite you, because of your work incorporates questions around our complex, evolving relationship with human beings and the environment, the survival of our species, and sustainability. And you're represented by Esther Schipper Gallery in Berlin, Jocelyn Wolf Gallery in Paris, Gallery Nachsten, can you pronounce it for me?
Next St. Stefan.
Thank you. In Vienna, and Galeria Alba Benitez in Madrid. And you currently, excitingly have a solo exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art and Contemporary Art in Nice, MAMAC, which is entitled Compost, and which runs until the end of February. So for those of you watching, hopefully this will be a good introduction to that exhibition. And now on to Professor Tim Ingold. Thank you very much for joining us today. So you are Emeritus Professor of Social Anthropology at the University of Aberdeen. One might say you're I guess, a superstar anthropologist, if you don't mind me saying. And so very pleased to have you here today. And you grew up many years ago in Kent, in a scientific family. Your father was a mycologist, as a subject that we will come to talk about later in the series as well. So a biologist specialized in fungi. And you commenced a science degree at Cambridge before switching to anthropology, which is the area in which you remain to this day, and an area which you've significantly shaped as well over the course of your career. And from your earliest research in the early 70s, you were studying the Sami and Finnish people in Lapland, which is, I think, one of the reasons why you became very interested in human and animal relationships throughout your career. And this was something that was certainly not a common area of research at the time. I think you probably agree. And so after this, you produced your first books, a series of essays called The Appropriation of Nature in the early 80s. And then through a reconsideration of tool making and speech as a criteria of what distinguished human beings, you also became interested in the connection in human evolution between language and technology, and the importance of what you call skilled practice. And you've also written and spoken at length about the link between what you call the 4 A's, which are anthropology, archaeology, art, and architecture, and which, while conventional theories, tend to treat artworks and buildings as mere elements of analysis, you see the 4 A's as mutually enhancing ways of engaging with our surroundings, and conceiving the relationship between human beings and the environment we inhabit. And other recent books, of which you've written many recently, Lines, the History, Brief History in 2016, which explores the use of lines in culture, and your book Correspondences, which we'll certainly touch on today, which illustrates a connection between the craft of letter writing and how we should relate to or correspond with our surrounding environment. And finally, you've just released a new book, Imagining for Real, which asks the question, what does imagination do for our perception of the world? So lots to discuss. So the reason I decided to bring you two both together, since you didn't know each other, right? I can attest that you did not know each other before this conversation. Because in both of your work, you conceive, for me, the human being and the living world very much on a similar level, which is something that we ought to do more, and we haven't historically clearly done as a species. And for me, Isa, this is very clear in many of your sculptures, which we can hopefully see some, in which the natural merges and intertwines with these very unnatural architectural brutalist forms. And another interesting example I thought was in one of your residencies on Fogo Island, which I think is the most eastern point of Canada, in 2017, you entitled your exhibition The Year of the Whale. And you said, I found the concept that there would be a year of the whale exciting. What would such a year look like? How does a whale live? So where does this interest start for you? Why were you always interested in your surrounding environment? At what point did you decide to incorporate it to your work? Was this residency a particularly important moment as well for you in terms of this this interest? Please tell us more.
Okay, yeah, the year of the whale, my youth was completed with years of wine. So I grown up in a winery in the Mosel area, and so I was always connected with the weather. If it's raining, if it's enough sun, and last year we had more sun, and this year we need some rain that the grapes get well, and so it was always like my parents always talked about it all the time. This was the main subject. So the nature, and also when we have too much rain, then we have trouble, and the floating of the river and all these things. So I'm still very connected to this. So I'm still have every year a year of the wine. And yeah, coming to Fogo Island was very, very special. So I moved since 30 years. I'm living in a town. I live in Berlin, and Fogo Island is nature pure. And maybe we can show image 1, and then you can see this was my little studio. So wow. This little. So it was amazing, beautiful. And I worked there for 3 months. And I called this exhibition afterwards the Year of the Whale, because it was really the first time I saw a whale. Maybe you show image 2. So on the left side, so you see a curtain. I was doing during my staying there. The next image. And then this is a fabric. I dyed with things I just found. That sometimes I used things from the nature to get the colors. But then I'm working with embroidery, so I kind of was a diary what happened every day for me at Fogo Island. And suddenly I looked out the window, and because of the tides, the what it looks every day different, and I was thinking, well, yes, this rock I never saw before, and then suddenly this rock moved, and I said, oh no, it's a whale. So this was I was really amazed by this idea of a whale. And yeah, you can show the next images. There's also some drawings I did. This is the Fogo Island was basically living until the 70s on the codfish fishing, and then there was overfishing, and the island, everybody moved away. And then there was this one lady from Fogo Island, Sita Kopp. She said, okay, this island, we need something different. Fishing is not possible anymore. So she built this beautiful hotel, and now they have a lot of tourists for whale watching, and it's the iceberg alley also for iceberg watching. And I think in a way now it's also something what is just for a while, because then already in a few, like where everybody is amazed seeing a big iceberg, but it's also something very sad to see a big iceberg, because it's in the future, and maybe this hotel will not exist again, so it will be under the water. And coming back to the whale, the next image, so I was so interested in the whale, and I was also did a lot research, and quite often a whale ashore, and there was on the beaches, and there was one in Newfoundland, and I followed a little bit the story of this whale, a huge whale, what it had with a whale heart. And they took out the whale heart from the whale, transported to Germany, close to Berlin, to Brandenburg, and calcinated, and then it went back to Toronto to the museum. And when you see the next image, then you see, so I really wanted to whale heart myself, and so I built a whale heart in ceramic. In the next image you can see it as well. So it's a ceramic sculpture about 1.20 meters long and 1 meter wide, so it's quite huge. And I really was so amazed or fascinated by the way that I really wanted to create my own whale heart. Yeah.
this ceramic heart, is it to scale? For those of you,
yeah, it is the scale of the
real. How big is this heart? So
it's 120, say 1 meter 20. Yeah, wow. It's long. So whale heart is huge. I didn't know, but when I really looked in the internet and was reading about this, so it's really a huge whale heart, thinking of how big the whale must be, 7, 8, 9 meters. Yeah.
And tell me about this beautiful image of the octopus.
The image of the octopus, yeah, this one, yeah,
eating this hotel that you told us about, right?
Yeah, he's kind of going like this, so I will be the next one being, so he touched it with his fingers and say, okay, I'm the next person who will be here, you know, when there are more of the icebergs are melting. So this was a little bit the gouache I was doing.
And I read that that in your conception, I suppose, of the living world, also the book by Donna Haraway, Staying with the Trouble, is something that has influenced you. Is that true?
Yes, it is also so I like this book. I was reading Donna Haraway when I was a student, the Cyborg Manifesto, and then I didn't pay not so much attention anymore, but now then everybody was talking about this book, and then I said, well, I have to read it, and then I was reading, and then I think her work has some influence, and maybe also I can talk a little bit about the exhibition I have in the MAMAC at the moment, because I think the book really some of the works has to do a lot with the book. So maybe it's image 22. Is it possible to jump into another image? I don't know, maybe not.
I think we'll find it. So in what way did the book, what is it in the book that
okay, I first tell a little bit about this exhibition, and then it's easier for me to say how much. Maybe I could also say that maybe before let's talk about the exhibition, and then then you see this. It was the title of the exhibition, Compost, and you see on the image there's a curtain with also an embroidery, the word compost. The other thing is a photo, and it's the exhibition is in Nice on the Côte d'Azur, and at the moment, for a few years already, they have a big problems that the palm trees are dying. You know, the phoenix palm, and there is this red palm weevil, what is going in the palm trees from the top, and kind of but it's not the weevil what is the bad animal, it's a group. Maybe the next image, then these are this little red palm weevil, the groups or the worms, and they're kind of going in these palm trees from the top and compost them more or less. And I was thinking, okay, the phoenix palm is not even, it comes from the Canarian island. It's not even from the
an imported tree.
Yeah, it's an imported tree, and now it's dying, and and for Denise people it's so important, and they're trying so many things. But I would say, okay, let it go. It's happened already, and maybe here with Donna Haraway, because she also goes one in her book. I think she goes one step further. She's not talking what can we do. She's more talking about how can we live in this damaged world, and this was really interesting for me. And so I was thinking, okay, this little group, maybe the next image, then you can see it's also not it looks very nice. There are also ceramics, little ceramics. And I was thinking, okay, the Côte d'Azur is overcrowded with tourists. Why not overcrowded it with this little worm, and also this little worm, so you can show the next picture, taking over the architecture. So it, and here again, maybe what Donna Haraway is writing, that in this last chapter in this book about Camille, that the humans will have a genome from an animal. And I was thinking it could be nice if a building, is connecting with this red palm beetle. And maybe on the next image, so you have this architecture from Jacques Crel. So I thinking I was thinking that the animal taking over at first of all the architecture. So here we have two buildings from Jacques Crel, and
which are buildings. Are these buildings from the French Riviera, from Nice?
Yeah, they're existing. Where now they look a little different, but you can see the next image. Then you can see that this building is getting to a cocon, and don't know what will happen to it. Maybe it flies away one day, whatever. And this is a building from Antilovac, what is also an icon building on the Côte d'Azur. It's also has a metamorphose to a worm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very beautiful and really interesting to see and understand better these works that I've seen in photographs. And Tim, to go to you, what from your side? So I mentioned, of course, that your research in Lapland. What was it? Is that kind of the first moment where you really started to explore these issues, or thinking about man and the living world on a similar platform?
I suppose it was, although I wasn't really thinking about them then. I was just doing as a novice anthropologist, doing what I was told to do, like collect information on kinship and residence and small local level politics. But I was also herding reindeer, and so I actually became practically involved in a rather close-up relationships with a particular kind of animal. So if Isa, it was whales, for me, it was reindeer, and I'm sure that sort of planted the seeds of later thinking, because I found, and anybody who works with reindeer knows, that they're highly intelligent, sentient animals. They have long memories, they can find their way around, they have quite a complicated social organization, and so on. And it would never have occurred to my Sami hosts that humans were in some sense above reindeer. I mean, because they were thinking of reindeer in terms of capacities that we have also, a sentience, memory, and so on. It's only because we happen to, in the West, put so much emphasis on things like rational thought and speech and symbolism that we place humans on a pedestal. But if we think of other aspects of being crucial to humanity, then reindeer have those too. So I kind of started with that. But then much later, but that was a way back. I was doing my fieldwork in the 1970s, and these debates were not on the table then, but it came back to them much later. I was writing about, you mentioned that when I got into the topic of human-animal relations, nobody else much was talking about it, and that was true in the late 1970s and the 1980s. I was getting interested in human-animal relations, and people were laughing at me and saying, what on earth are you, you're supposed to be an anthropologist. Why are you spending all this time going on about animals? Then all the cultural theorists waded in, and at which point I thought they were writing so much rubbish, and they knew so little about animals themselves, that I decided to give up on all of that and focus elsewhere for a while. I really got rather annoyed with it all, but then I've come back to it, but particularly because I've become more and more concerned with the loose way in which people talk about humans and non-humans. I mean, non-human is a very bad category. It includes everything from chimpanzees to worms to shotguns. I mean, anything, and it really makes no sense. And it also embodies a human perspective. I think if you are a reindeer, then the world will consist of reindeer and non-reindeer. And if you are a whale, it will consist of whales and non-whales. So something is wrong. And actually, Donna Haraway, I think, makes the same point somewhere. Something is deeply wrong with the category of non-human. And I've been finding that a lot of the theorists who say that they're establishing a level playing field between humans and non-humans and claim to be speaking on behalf of the humans still have human exceptionalism right at the heart of what they're saying. And the worst offender in that regard is somebody called Bruno Latour. And let me just give you one example of this, where he talks about how objects, or things we might now call objects, like tools and artifacts, were brought into the collective as non-human parts of the human collective. And he imagines a scenario way back in early prehistory, when our ancestors, these hominids, were first using crude stone implements to hunt game. And what does he say? The stone implements are incorporated into the collective as non-humans, but not the animals being hunted, which is ridiculous, because actually, so far as the hunters are concerned, it's the prey that are part of the society they're dealing with, not the tools. So there's this curious tendency in a lot of theory to assume that non-humans equals inanimate artifacts, objects that have been recruited into human lives on the basis that humans are quite unique in the animal kingdom, in the extent to which they recruit objects into their lives, and other animals don't. And the whole actor network theory is founded on that presumption, that actually humans are unique because of the way they incorporate objects into the world, and therefore they have a unique kind of history. And that's what I've been trying to argue against. I've been trying to argue that other animals have their own lives to lead. They don't have to be part of our collective at all, although we might relate to them in different ways. And the critical thing is to let these other animals be, and to recognize that we are as much a part of their history as they are part of ours. And therefore, history is not just human history. History is the whole process in which living beings, through their lives and their presence, have created or continue to create the conditions in which other living beings come into existence and live their lives. And the whole unfolding of that huge relational network in which we all exist, that is evolution. So I've wanted to break down the boundary between history and evolution. So that's the kind of big picture.
And it comes also to you criticize also in the same respect the term that we use a lot today. As much as we talk about Donna Haraway, we probably talk even more about the Anthropocene.
Yes.
And we live in the era of the Anthropocene. It's something that we hear a lot about. That's in the same respect, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of problems. I mean, I don't like Donna Haraway's style, but I'm probably on the same page with her in terms of what she's trying to argue. Right? I mean I think what she's really saying is that we have to give up on the doctrine of progress. We have to give up on this idea that human life is going to get better and better. We're going to get more and more in control of the natural world. If in a way, it's to give up on optimism, the optimism that the solution is just around the corner and we're nearly there, and then we'll all emerge into the light, and opt instead for hope, which is a sense that, well, at least we can carry on, at least we can try and keep the show on the road, make sure that there's life for generations after us and after us and after us, and so on. So it's a recipe for sustainability rather than progress, on the idea that we're never going to break out into the light. there's no end to it, but we can put our effort into keeping on going, and I'm with her with that. But the trouble is that the notion of the Anthropocene, which has been introduced as just another geological era, along with the previous ones, Holocene, Miocene, and so on, that belongs to a stratigraphic conception of the history of the Earth, in which you have one layer, one era, which is depicted as a kind of layer, followed by another era, it's another layer that goes on top of that, followed by another era as another layer that goes on top of that. So it is a kind of linear stratigraphic conception of adding layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. And that is a residue of precisely the kind of thought that I think Haraway, and certainly I, would want to put aside. I don't think it's right to suppose that we have a new era to be put on top of the previous one, or that the new eras somehow cancel out the ones that occurred before. And what I want to do is to move our thinking around 90 degrees, in a sense. So instead of thinking of the relationship between this sheet and that sheet, we go in between the sheets, like the water of a river flows in between the banks. You know, the water is not going from one bank to the next, and we're not moving from one era to the next. We're in the water, in the river, going in between. So it's not just it's not just the anthropo bit that is problematic. I mean, we know why it's problematic, because not all humans are to blame. Humanity as a whole is not to blame for climate change. And many people have argued that. It's capitalism, or it's the West, or somebody. But anyway, it's not anthropos as such. So the anthropo bit is not really very appropriate. But there's something wrong with the scene bit as well. And I'm really, I speak strongly here, but I am fed up with listening to Ponzi academics competing with one another to say my scene is better than yours. I mean, there's been some of the most ridiculous literature in which people have just been competing with one another over what they want to call this new era, while the world burns. It's absurd, and I think is just an example of sometimes how academics dig a hole for themselves rather than actually getting on with saying anything useful. But that's my little rant on Anthropocene.
No, but I couldn't agree more, and certainly the concept of these scenes is very unnatural. It's very against what is the reality, which is a constant evolution. So I totally agree with that, and I don't know if Isa, you want to react.
Yeah, I completely agree with this. Yeah. I think I'm thinking similar, but I have a different way to express this in my works, that I'm always try that nature and animals and everything is kind of on the same level, and that the one thing is not more important than the other. So I think when this worm is moving into the Côte d'Azur, then it's fine for me. Maybe I have more ironic way on this, but yes, yeah.
And you know, in this also, your work is very much about the same idea about how this nature can't be controlled, how it has its own life and its own evolution, and in also your use of material, because you use clay as well. It's a material that is quite symbolic, I think, because it's a material that you can tell us more, but that doesn't have a clear outcome, that also has a sort of life of its own.
Yes, yeah, of course, yeah. I since a few years I'm working with clay, and when clay is really direct, you know, you have something soft and you can make a shape of it, but also the clay comes out of the earth, the water as well. So you connect it. And then I also in the last few years, I started to do the clays. So I don't buy this clay color, I do the clays myself. And this is also things coming out of the earth, like feldspar or silica or carbonates or dioxides. And for example, when you take a copper carbonate, mix it with titan dioxide, then you get a beautiful turquoise. So I could, like sometimes I could spend hours just for this and forgetting about the sculpture. Let's say it's sculpture, or because it's so fascinating what colors, what is possible to do with minerals out of the world. So yeah, and then I was doing, I was also fascinated by bacteria. So there's this combination doing bacteria. Then we have this image 16, and yeah, the bacteria is a very, very small creature, and it needs light, and it's needs light to live, and it needs oxygen to live. And we have this bacteria in our body, you know, we also need them to live. And the bacteria it's a part of our smell, not yet now thinking of the bad smell, thinking of yeah, the smell that you like a person, the smell of friend, to find a friend, you know, because you're talking that you can smell this person, or falling in love has to do a lot with the smell. And yeah, the bacteria is also it's organizing the metabolism. And here I'm again in the architecture, that the metabolism is also an architecture group in the 60s, what had the idea of regeneration, of exploring, of growing in the air, growing on the water. They were thinking of architecture like almost like the trees. So you can see when you show the next images.
Is it a Japanese? Japanese?
Yeah, the Japanese architecture called Metabolism. So I'm kind of, when I'm kind of connecting the clay to the bacteria, and ending up by an architecture group from the 60s again, who had the idea of metabolism, and then the sculptures look like this. So you can see the next images when you show them. So sometimes it's very I do connecting many things to get to this result, but the metabolism, the architecture metabolism, I was really fascinated by. They were thinking they can connect the nature, that you can build a building, like that you can add something, like for a family, and you get a child, and then the room of the child, you connect to the building, and when your kids get older, they go away, then you remove the part of it. So I thought this is a really nice idea of thinking of a building. And it really the metabolism, there were not so many buildings realized in the end, because it was more an utopia. But so I came from this bacteria to the metabolism. Yeah.
I mean, the idea of architecture is something a very big part of your work, and something that's very interesting because for me, it certainly represents the kind of the zeitgeist, the thoughts and of the time. So this was obviously a particular period in which people were, you know, actually exploring maybe things that we should be thinking about again today. But it certainly wasn't. It certainly wasn't the dominant zeitgeist. Certainly the other works maybe that you've worked on, which are more around, you know, Le Corbusier and actually they're very like modernist, very almost against this idea. Very well, maybe you could talk about it more. But
yeah, when well, it's difficult with the modernism because I like I like the buildings. I like Corbusier. I like Mies van der Rohe. But in the end, if you think of the modernistic, they had a deep belief in a utopia and they were thinking of a new society through a complete new architecture. But the problem was that this whole ideas, they were raised on a drawing board. And I would say this is when I'm and also the same with the postmodernism. They had many ideas and they were thinking, okay, the architecture is something so complex. We have to involve people. We have to think of the past. We have to think of the history. But in the end, the postmodernism is very modernistic. There is also only a big gesture by a few men in the end. So it's a lot about this failing of architecture. They're really intelligent people thinking how the world could look better, be better, how can a building help us, but to live better. But in the end, it's all these ideas, they always failed. And this is what I was interested by. Maybe I also can show or make it clearer on the work. I have to look, this is the image 9. Image 9. And I have to image 9. And this is the work, yeah, you can tell already by the title, the tea and coffee piazza d'Italia in post-Katrina's time. So it's about this well, the tea and coffee comes from this this tea and coffee set from Alessi. What I always say, this postmodernism, they had this big idea, but they ended up in a sugar cup or in a tea and coffee set. So Alessi asked all this, started to ask architects in the 80s to make a tea and coffee set. It was out of sterling silver, and the Piazza d'Italia is in New Orleans, a piazza built by Charles Moore in 1978, and it was in like the idea of an Italian piazza with little cafes and everything in an American town doesn't work so well because they have a different way of living. There's more like this coffee to go in all. They are just offices. So it was a piazza what never really worked. And then saying that in post-Katrina times, when in 2005, the Katrina hurricane came to New Orleans, this was a completely new situation. So I'm this is then like a work that's in the end, in the back, you have this curtain with the title. It says, there's embroidery on it, and it says, times are hard, but postmodern. And
Tim, you also criticize this concept of modernity, don't you, in some of your work?
Well, sort of, but like I said, it's complicated because if you take something like the Bauhaus, for example, which is regarded as in some ways as a paragon of modernity, but it took as its model the medieval craft guild, and specifically promoted an organic conception of the world as opposed to one of the techno-mechanistic domination of nature. And of course, that was in the wake of the First World War. And what they were really protesting against was mechanized warfare, the absolute violent destruction of a world by machines. That's what they had seen, and they were developing an architecture that would slightly utopian, that would promote a sense once again of organic harmony in the world. And the trouble with this label modernism, you know, is that it goes all the way from that to a very organic conception to military aggression with armed warfare. So it really, you know, modernism has always been a critique of itself, and I wouldn't want to say, you know, if you was talking about criticizing modernity, you always have to say what bit of modernity you actually want to criticize. But I have found much inspiration in the thinking of medieval philosophers, and one of the reasons why I find it so appealing is because when these guys were writing, you know, modernism hadn't happened yet. So they weren't writing in response to modernism. They were writing from their hearts. And so things come out with a certain sense of feeling and directness, which I find very refreshing. And I think that many ways, rather than trying a postmodernism or postmodernism or post this or post-humanism or whatever, we might actually learn from taking a step back into the past and bringing those debates where people were talking before all this modernist thing had happened into the present.
I noticed somebody in the audience had a question. Layla, I don't know how to let her speak. Layla, if you want to ask a question in the chat, I can ask it directly. Maybe if anybody watching has any questions, feel free to write it in the chat, and now would be a good time to ask. Before finishing, I wanted to ask in particular, Tim, I mean, you said in one of your lectures that you say that art has taken on the mantle from science of ecological awareness, and you know, why did you say that? And I think something in particular around the idea of attention. Is that right?
Well, there's a lot about attention. I'm not quite sure, but just to start with art and science, I mean, science has changed a lot over the last 30 or 40 years. Science today is very different from what science was, say, in the 1960s and 1970s, when ecology was really coming of age, and we're seeing some wonderful ecological studies, very holistic studies coming out then, which today are regarded as a bit sort of amateurish and by mainstream science. And what has happened has been almost something like a methodological arms race in science, which has been driven by the sense that the strongest methodologies are the ones that confer a complete immunity of the investigator from whatever it is that they're investigating. And the whole point about scientific methodology is that it should prohibit any contact between the sensibility of the scientist and that which they are investigating, because of this idea that only then can you get to an objective truth. Only then can you get to the facts. The difficulty with that methodological immunization is that it completely takes the scientist out of the field of relationships in which they're involved in making their observations. In other words, but that relational involvement is at the root of ecological sensibility. So that's why science has found itself breaking away from the sort of ecological sensibility which art has taken on, because art starts from the premise that you know the world from the inside of your involvement in it. And it's this knowing from the inside, I think, that is fundamental to the way in which art is proceeding at the moment. And there are two sort of implications about that. I mean, the first is that art is not necessarily opposed to science. What we need is a different kind of science that is a bit more humble, a bit more deferential, a bit less totalitarian in its impulses, a bit more prepared to recognize that other ways of knowing are possible, and to recognize that you can only do science because you're a being in this world, because you inhabit the world, that science itself is a practice of habitation. But also, we have to think again about what we really mean by the search for truth. I mean, research means searching and searching and searching again. It doesn't mean you'll ever come to a final answer. In fact, research is a form of staying with the trouble, in Donna Haraway's terms. And that means that we have to stop thinking of truth as the same thing as objective fact. Now, it doesn't mean that truth could be anything you like, but there comes a point in any kind of research where the things that you're studying, the things that you're observing, plants, animals, whatever they might be, begin to tell you how to observe. And that's the point where truth goes beyond the facts, when it's actually, you are not just observing them, you're actually learning from them, and they are beginning to tell you things. And that's the point where attention becomes critical. Because if you're just making scientific observations of things, you're not paying attention. To pay attention actually is to listen to what the things you're studying, people you're studying, are actually telling you. And that at the moment is still something that mainstream science is not prepared to admit to in its protocols. And it would be very important that it does. But that's why the answer to your question, why art has taken on the mantle of ecological sensibility that science has very largely abandoned.
Isa, what's your feeling about that? How do you feel the role? What is the role of art and artists for during this time?
Well, it's really, yeah, it's really nice.
Big question for you to answer, but what
big question. Yeah, it's really nice what Timothy is saying, and with the art, this is. I think it's a different way to say something. The art, it's not so. You're not so clear, and it's not a fact, it's more a feeling, maybe I would say. It's not as an artist, you always have the chance to when you don't have to stay with the facts, you can be more, you can play with it much more, but it's very important that people pay attention what you say, what you're trying to say, but this is difficult. This is too much. I don't know.
One thing I observe in your work, which I like, is that you often hide things in your exhibition space. There's something about the very small details that you leave people to find and discover, which I think is almost an interesting metaphor as well for what art can do.
Yeah, that you have to look a little bit for it, and that you really probably have to go close and have to go on your knees to see it. Lots of my works are below knee level, so you really have to go down to see it. Or with the embroidery, you really have to go closer to get it, and it's and sometimes it takes a while to understand. Maybe sometimes even the next day, yeah.
And I love an anecdote from a podcast I listened about in which you spoke, Tim, in which you spoke about the influence for one of your book's lines, which I loved, which you said it all came about because you woke up in the morning and you came outside and you saw the glistening of a snail trail outside and glistening in the light, in the morning light, and you saw that, you paid attention to it, and it was actually one of the inspirations for a book you wrote. Is that right?
Well, in a way, yes. I mean, the thing is, I was already thinking about lines anyway, but then once you start thinking about them, you start finding them everywhere in unexpected places. And that was one of the unexpected places. And we usually think of snails and slugs as rather ugly. particularly slugs, because they don't have beautiful shells, they're just slime. But then when you see these trails and you think, well, the trails are just as much a part of the animal as the animal itself. They're really very beautiful things when they combine with the sunlight. And yes, it is all about attending to things. I think it's important to stress that we're not talking about the kind of attention that you might get with a road sign, like stop. It's not like stop and look, because it's much more. It's not about attending to things so much as attending with things. And that's the point about the attention, is that it couples the movement of your own observation or listening with the movement of whatever it is. So if you're a bird watcher, for example, you're following the movement of this bird that's captured your attention and that you're entranced by. And there are two sides to this. I think it's very important. There are two sides to attention. There's one side which is about skill, that you are skilled perception. And there's another side which is about exposure and risk, of opening up yourself to something. And the best example of this is just a simple act of walking, that when you take a step, you actually fall forward. You take the risk of falling forward, and then you put your foot forward and place it on firm ground, and that stops you from falling over. So you start with the risky business of exposure. You're going to fall, and then you finish off with the skilled business of putting your foot where you need to in order to get a foothold, and it alternates exposure in skillment as you walk along. And these are two necessary parts of, or two sides of attention. You can't have one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't seen any questions. I mean, last call for questions. If you have any, please write them in the chat. And I wanted to finish off, and maybe you've already sort of mentioned it, for instance, Tim, and what you've just been saying, but if you had one action that you would recommend for our watchers, for anybody listening, in terms of what they could do on an individual basis to make the planet a better place, what would your recommendations be to both of you? And also, do you have any things that we should be watching or reading that you particularly recommend, apart from all of your incredible books, and to go to Isa's new question?
I said, you want to start?
No, you.
Well, I don't know, but I think the one thing I would say that you could do from tomorrow, and which I've been doing now for some time, is to take a walk every day before breakfast. It's something, I used to do it when our children were small and I was taking them to school. So I had the school run, and I would have a walk them there and then walk back, and that was enough. And then they grew up, and I wasn't doing it anymore, and I began to feel I was becoming a vegetable. And then I resolved one day that I was going to go for a half-hour walk around the park before breakfast every morning, and it completely, it's a lifesaver. It's good for me, but it's good for everything else as well, because every day you observe the passage of the seasons, what's happening with the trees, the plants, the birds, everything. And I live in a city. It's not a, it's got some parks. It's not, I don't have to be in the countryside. But one thing I noticed is that during this pandemic, of course, so many more people were doing just that, because they weren't allowed to do anything else during lockdown, and how much they appreciated it.
That's nice. Yeah.
And anything to read, any inspirational literature or something you've watched, anything to recommend in particular?
I don't know, a former PhD student who's just passed, Viva, gave me a Christmas present, and it was a collection of excerpts by the poet Rilke. And so each day of the year, there's a page to read. And I hadn't read Rilke before, and I'm really enjoying it.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Isa, your turn.
Yeah, the action to do. I think it would be very nice if everybody goes and get some seeds for a tree and get some soil and plant it, or you can get the seeds from an apple or from an avocado, whatever, and then really pay attention to this growing process. And maybe after a few years you can, so it's nice to have at least one plant in your apartment or in your house, or if it's growing big, if you're doing a good job, if you always water it and have it in the light, then you can take it outside and plant it somewhere. So maybe this would make a nicer world.
I think a fantastic idea. And any inspirational reading?
Not at the moment. I didn't think of it, and then
You've got all these books behind you. There must be something.
There are many books behind me. Yes. This is all. No, not. I didn't think about this, so I don't. Better not. Still, there are no questions from the audience. No.
I'm sure people have some questions that they can ask you at some point later on. I just wanted to, well, we're going to finish there because it's 6 o'clock, Paris, Brussels, Berlin time. So I just wanted to thank you both very much for being here today, for sharing. Thank you very much for our audience for watching. To finish off, I just wanted to say, so behind me is a work by Kiki Smith, which is the new exhibition at the Fondation Thalie in Brussels. So we very much invite you to come and see the exhibition. It's on until May. Very exciting time, opportunity to see a really important artist in Brussels at the Fondation Thalie. And Isa's exhibition is still on until the end of February, Compost at the Mamac in Nice, if you're in Nice. Tim just released a new book, Imagining for Real, which we didn't get a chance to talk about, but you can have a chance to read. And also 2 new reeditions of your books, Being Alive and The Perception of the Environment. Am I right?
Yeah.
That's
right.
And I'm not sure, do you have anything, if you have anything else to share? If otherwise, our next talk is on the 27th of February. So I invite everybody watching to come to that, you too as well, if you can be there. And the conversation will be on the website, on YouTube, at the start of the week, and we'll also an audio podcast edition is being made for all the streaming platforms. So yes, sign up to our newsletter, Instagram, Facebook to hear more. So yeah, thank you again, and I wish you all a fantastic evening and weekend.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
This was really quick. Yeah. 1 hour is over. Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.